Welcome back to the deep dive. So, you sent over a whole stack of material. We're talking articles, some research, even a few internal white papers, and they all circle around this one big question. What makes a project manager, a PM, truly invaluable? And, we're not just talking about checking boxes or sending those delegation emails. If you're here for that quick, surgical insight into the strategic value they bring, you're definitely in the right place.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because PMs, they're so often just pigeonholed, seen as high-level administrators. But when you really analyze this material, it shows there's so much more. They're organizational impact multipliers, professional friction reducers. They're that essential bridge, really, that translates these fuzzy, often conflicting organizational needs into, clean, actionable, and financially successful outcomes.
Okay, so our mission today is pretty straightforward then. We're going to focus on 5 distinct pillars of value. These are the things that take a PM from just a helpful administrator to an absolutely indispensable leader. We've got focusing on the customer, building a great team, fostering relationships and communication, actually managing the project. And this one's critical, acting as an organizational shield by breaking down barriers. Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the foundational piece, the element that really defines success or failure. The customer.
Exactly. And in project management, customer is, it's a very strategic term. It's the entity, it could be a person, a client, a whole department that sets the requirements, the budget, and those non-negotiable success metrics. Project success really just hinges entirely on meeting and often exceeding their standards.
Yeah, and reading the breakdown of who actually is a customer is pretty surprising. It's not just the external client with the big check, is it?
Oh, not at all. Far from it. The sources show 2 very distinct categories. First, you have your internal customers. These are the stakeholders inside your own organization. We're talking executive management, resource managers, the legal team, even your own team members who depend on others for their work. Their satisfaction gets overlooked so often. And then, of course, you have the external customers, the clients, consumers, suppliers. The real strategic insight here is that a PM has to satisfy both groups at the same time.
The sources really drill down on this idea that the PM's first job isn't delivering. It's actually investigating. It's almost like a forensic role, trying to figure out what the customer truly expects. Where does that value come from in that investigation part?
It comes from protecting the project against misalignment. That's the key. See, a customer, they'll often present a symptom. They'll say, we need a faster reporting system.
Let's go.
But the PM adds that strategic worth by digging into the root cause, the real why. And that process establishes what they call requirements traceability right from day one. The sources, they highlighted 4 fundamental questions you absolutely have to ask.
Okay, first one. What problem are you truly trying to solve? And the answer might be, an efficiency problem, but that's still too vague.
Right, which leads directly to the second, and I think more impactful question. How is this problem currently impacting your organization? This forces them to quantify it. Maybe they're losing market share because their current processes are causing late orders. Now you've got a real financial metric, something you can tie the project success to.
And the third question clarifies the urgency, the risk. What prompted you to ask for help now? I mean, they could be facing a budget freeze, or maybe there's an internal deadline where they lose department funding if they don't improve. That just instantly raises the stakes for everyone.
And finally, number 4. What is your ultimate hope for the outcome? And notice it's outcome, not output. It's about increasing order speed without sacrificing quality. The sources just kept hammering this point home. Taking that time to drill down into the why is the single biggest factor in preventing costly rework later on. If you get the goals right, you avoid building a perfect solution to the wrong problem.
I totally get the value there, but wouldn't that kind of deep questioning, wouldn't it slow down a project that might already be on a really aggressive timeline? Did the sources talk about that trade-off?
They did, and the consensus was really clear. The cost of that initial investigation is always lower than the cost of rework down the line. One statistic we saw pointed out that something like 30% of project rework comes directly from failing to define the internal customer's true needs early. So that time up front, it's like insurance against massive cost overruns later.
Okay, that makes sense. So it reframes the PM as this organizational investigator, just ensuring alignment. But once that alignment is set, you need the engine to actually execute the vision. Which brings us to the who, the project's biggest asset, the team.
Yes, the PM is the team's architect. It's about building the right team and then, crucially, empowering them. The value here gets added in 2 ways that, they go way beyond standard HR functions.
First being skills alignment.
Precisely. The skills have to be meticulously tailored to what the customer's technical requirements are. The classic example they cited was a project that needed medical expertise. Now, if your team is full of really hard workers, but they don't have that specialized background, their output is just going to be deficient. Hard work and motivation, they just can't make up for a lack of foundational essential skills.
Hold on, if the PM is focused on skills alignment, are they basically acting as HR? Where do you draw that line between the PM's job and, the company's hiring department?
That is a great question. It gets right to that friction point. The PM isn't doing the formal hiring, but they are responsible for the team's performance and delivery. Their value is in spotting the gaps and then advocating for the resources or the training needed to fill them. And that leads right into the second piece of team building, valuing and trusting the individuals.
And how does a PM deliver that value? What does that look like?
It looks like creating an environment where every single person is treated like a valued expert. You show it by giving them real input on how tasks get done, by actively encouraging them to ask questions, and by shielding them from all that administrative noise. A PM enables the team's best work by removing friction, not by micromanaging. And that trust, that's what unlocks their full potential.
So if the customer focus is the alignment and team building is the architecture, then you need something to hold that architecture together, a constant flow of information, which brings us to the foundation of it all, relationships and communication.
People call this a soft skill, but it is the hardest, most necessary strategic element there is. The PM have to set the tone. They become a diplomat, building trust with the team, with all the stakeholders. And we saw really strong evidence that this communication has to be high frequency and proactive.
And what struck me was how much the research stressed the need for that daily check-in, almost separate from any technical status report. Why is that daily chat such a critical value add?
Because that daily check-in, it's not just about being polite, it's a high-frequency risk identification protocol. That's where the PM spots the small problems. I'm still waiting on approval from Department X, or this piece of code isn't integrating right, before they blow up into project-killing disasters. Just by asking, what can I do to help you right now? The PM shows respect, and more importantly, they identify and isolate future risks immediately.
But it's not just about the small stuff. The PM also has to communicate the bigger picture, right? Because you have an expert designer or a coder who's deep in the weeds on their one task, and they can lose sight of the overall goal.
Absolutely. A lack of context is a silent killer of quality. The PM has to make sure everyone understands not just their task, but the big picture goal for the final product and the customer's why. Let's use that graphic designer example from the sources.
Right. The designer's asked to create a beautiful ad campaign. Technically, they nail it. But if the PM hasn't communicated that the ultimate goal is to appeal specifically to educators, that designer might use visuals that appeal to, financial analysts instead.
Exactly. Flawless execution of the wrong thing is still failure. By providing that big picture, the PM empowers the team to self-correct, to tailor their work to the real strategic goal. They turn simple tasks into strategic contributions.
And all of this relationship and communication work, that's what lets the PM do the hard, measurable parts of the job. Which brings us to the title itself, actively managing the project. The value here has to be quantifiable, right? In time and budget.
This is where the PM really switches hats from diplomat to financial guardian. The primary quantifiable value add here is controlling scope creep. Scope creep is just. It's death by 1,000 cuts. All those small, undocumented changes that just destroy a timeline and drain all the resources.
So how does a PM specifically add value in controlling that scope?
They set up a rigorous, documented change control process. They become the institutional voice of, no, not right now. They make sure any new requirement gets formally evaluated against the baseline for its impact on time, cost, and resources. Without that diligence, the timeline just evaporates, and the budget is right behind it. Their strategic worth can be measured in the actual dollars they save the company from wasting.
And what else falls under this sort of hard management pillar?
The focus on the critical path. The critical path is that sequence of tasks that absolutely must be completed on time for the whole project to finish on time. If any task on that path gets delayed by 1 day, the entire project is delayed by 1 day. A PM's value here is that relentless focus on those specific tasks, proactively clearing obstacles for those specific people. They don't just track the schedule, they actively steer the most time-sensitive parts.
So it's not just reporting risks, it's proactive risk mitigation built right into how they manage the schedule. Okay, so the sources also emphasize that even with the perfect plan and the most talented team, you can still get derailed by internal politics, bureaucracy. This leads to that final fascinating pillar of value, the PM as the organizational shield, breaking down institutional barriers.
This is where the PM truly earns their stripes as a strategic leader. They have to challenge the status quo, that really dangerous mentality of, well, because we've always done it this way. Their value is in modeling ingenuity and collaboration, encouraging the team to find new ways to do things.
Which means they have to be willing to take some organizational heat for the team.
Exactly. They act as the primary organizational advocate and facilitator. They absorb the political friction so the team doesn't have to. When the team comes up with an innovative new approach, the PM provides the support and the political cover for them to actually try it. They go to bat for more resources when it's necessary.
Can you give us that concrete example of reducing friction?
Yeah, the classic roadblock is cross-departmental dependency. Your team needs some data from the finance department, but finance just isn't responding. The whole project is on hold. A high-value PM doesn't just tell their team to keep trying, no. They step in immediately. They use their high-level relationship capital to just bypass that roadblock, reaching out directly to the leadership in that other department to get things unstuck. They shield the team from organizational paralysis. They are the oil in the machine, making sure things never, ever stall.
That really does make them the institutional friction reducer, a massive strategic asset. Okay, so let's bring this all back together for you, the learner. We've laid out the 5 essential ways a project manager adds strategic worth, really moving them beyond just being an administrator. They're the investigator, focused on the customer's why. They're the architect, building and empowering the best possible team. They're the diplomat, fostering that high-frequency communication and building relationships. They're the guardian, actively controlling scope and managing that critical path. And finally, they're the shield, relentlessly breaking down barriers and finding new solutions.
And the final synthesis is really this. The PM's role isn't about enforcing a process. It is about enabling success. They enable the customer's full vision to come to life. They enable the team to perform at their absolute best, and they enable the whole organization to implement change and new solutions efficiently. That strategic shift from administrator to enabler, that's the core value, which I think raises a really important question for you to consider, especially based on how much the sources emphasize relationships and alignment. So if a project manager successfully manages the budget and the timeline, they check all the boxes on scope and critical path, but they fail to communicate the big picture, that strategic why, or they don't ask those deep why questions to the customer. Can that project ever truly deliver long-term organizational value? Is efficiency without that deep understanding just a faster way to get to the wrong place? A new, more expensive problem 6 months down the road? That's something to mull over as you think about what project success really means.
That is a fantastic thought to end on. If you're looking to continue exploring the impact of effective project leadership, this deep dive into your sources is just the beginning. Thank you so much for joining us today on The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.